Hi, welcome again. I'm Andrea Mulrine, and I'm president of the League of Women Voters of Lackawanna County. Once again, I'd like to welcome you to our Lunch with the League session, and please feel free to continue eating. We just want to get the program started again so that we can finish on time. The League of Women Voters, just to give you a little bit of background, is a nonpartisan political organization. So we are nonpartisan in that we neither support nor act against any candidate for any political office. So you're not going to hear me talk about the pros and cons of any one person in particular. However, we are political in that we do take positions on issues, and we will work toward furthering those particular issues. Locally, the League is organized into three different organizations, if you will. So we have a local league, a state league, and a national league. When you join the League of Women Voters, and I have very nicely provided a membership brochure for everyone here, so I hope you all think about joining the League. When you join the League, you join at all three levels. So by joining the League of Women Voters of Lackawanna County, you automatically become a member of the League of Women Voters of Pennsylvania and also the League of Women Voters of the United States. So at each level, the League is a grassroots organization, so it is the local membership that drives what we do in Lackawanna County. So our coverage region is all of Lackawanna County, primarily because of the volunteers that we have, the membership of our local league. We focus primarily on election services. So the things like candidate debates and candidate interviews, helping people understand better how to vote, helping people understand better how to run for public office. Those are the things that we cover at the local level because that's what our local membership would like us to cover. So today our topic is citizen engagement, debunking the mystique of getting involved. So that's going to talk about how all of us as just public citizens can help the candidates of our choice can work on different campaigns. Some of the other things that we have that are coming up right now, this of course is September now, and moving into October, November timeframe. That's our busy season, if you will. So we have the Scranton City Council candidate debate on Thursday, October 27th at 7 p.m., and that will be held here on the University of Scranton campus, but in the DeNaples Center in the Moskowitz Theater. So that's on Mulberry Street for those who are watching from home and need to know how to get here. That will be, again, 7 p.m., and that's the Scranton City Council candidates. Then on Wednesday, November 2nd, we will host a debate for the Lackawanna County Commissioner candidates, again 7 p.m. also in the Moskowitz Theater. We'll also be conducting interviews with other candidates for Lackawanna County offices and also for Scranton School District. And there's one magisterial district race where there actually is a race in the general election, and we'll be covering that as well. And all of those interviews will be available on ECTV. And I'd like to thank Mark Migliori, who is here today also from ECTV taping, so that we can make all of this available both for broadcast on ECTV and then also on the League's website. So you can feel free, if you like what you hear today, point your friends to www.lwvlackawanna.org or to ECTV in the Comcast area, and they'll be able to see what we're sharing with you today. I'm really excited this year to also announce that we have a new online voters guide. This is something that we've talked about needing for a very long time, and the League of Women Voters of the United States has purchased a system that we call vote411.org, and allows all of the local leagues to do a cost sharing. So for a league of our size, it was relatively inexpensive, and we can create races within this voters guide. And what we've done now, because this is the very first time that we're doing it, we're creating the races for all of the Lackawanna County candidates and all of the Scranton candidates, but we're not branching out to cover the rest of Lackawanna County just yet. We're hoping that with increased membership with people from other areas in Lackawanna County, that we can increase the coverage in our online voters guide for the next upcoming elections and be able to cover even more. But we're very excited to be able to announce that. It's not live yet. We'll be asking the candidates over the next couple of weeks to log in and update their information and answer a couple of questions. So once we get a pool of information available, then we'll publish it and make it live. So you can log in, you can enter your address and get your particular ballot for Election Day and some information about the candidates who are running in your area. The other thing that we have that's coming up won't occur until Saturday, January 28th. Now, for those of you who are aware of the things that the League has done in the past, we run campaign school, or what we call How to Run for Public Office, every other year, and we do that in the municipal election year. So this year is a municipal election. We're electing local offices. So this past January, we hosted campaign school, How to Run for Public Office. Well, now we're adding another layer. We're partnering, the University of Scranton and the Political Science Department here has actually signed a partnership agreement with the Center for American Women in Politics at Rutgers University to host a program here called Ready to Run, and it's basically campaign school for women. So it's not closed to men, not by any stretch of the imagination, but it is geared toward issues that women face in running for public office. So that will be hosted here on the University of Scranton campus on January 28th, and the following weekend, that's a Saturday, the following weekend is the snow date. We always have to have in northeastern Pennsylvania, of course, a snow date, so we have that scheduled as well. But that's a full day. Campaign school for us has always been a half a day, and boy, do we cram a lot of information into that half a day. So we're excited to be expanding it to a full day and covering a lot more depth on some of the topics. So we're going to cover campaign finance, how do you raise money, and also messaging, how do you stay on topic, how do you deliver your message, as well as some of the topics that we've covered normally in campaign school. So we're very excited to be bringing that to northeastern Pennsylvania as well. So I hope that you look for the, if you're interested in running for office or even helping someone run for office, then this is a topic that might be of interest to you, and we invite you to join us then. Without further ado, though, I'd like to move on to our speaker for today. And again, our topic for today is citizen engagement, debunking the mystique of getting involved. And I'd like to welcome to the podium one of our past presidents of the League of Women Voters of Lackawanna County, Dr. Elizabeth Randol. Liz has a degree in philosophy with concentrations in political science and Russian studies and Buddhist studies from Washington and Lee University. Her master's degree is in liberal studies at North Carolina State University, and she has a PhD in philosophy from SUNY Binghamton, specializing in social and political philosophy. Currently, she is serving as a campaign manager. I'm not going to mention who the candidate is, again, as I'm going to stay strictly nonpartisan, but she's serving as a campaign manager. Prior to that, immediately in the springtime, Liz ran for the office of Lackawanna County Commissioner, so she can talk about some of her experiences in running that particular race. And prior to that, she worked for the treasurer, Rob McCord, Pennsylvania treasurer, as the policy director and as the director of the Women and Money Project. She was, prior to that, the Lackawanna County Commissioner Chief of Staff, and prior to that, she was home here on the University of Scranton campus as the director of the Jane Kopis Women's Center. I could go on and on about Liz's community service. She's served on many, many boards, and she continues as the president now of Pages and Places, which is taking place in Scranton this coming weekend. Boy, that'll be here before we know it. So without further ado, I invite Liz Randol to the podium.
Well, welcome everyone. I think I was expecting more of a casual, this is tremendous. I'm thrilled not only that you all are here, but certainly for the attention that the League is going to get, hopefully as a result of that. I would like to re-pitch the membership. As the past president of the League, it is amazing how much the League does on an absolute minimal budget. We have great volunteers and people that are officers in the League. A lot of us have been around for a long time. But thank you to Andrea and to the League, to Larry, who always is our sort of quasi-ghost president of the League, to ECTV. Of course, Mark is he's always making sure that everything that the League does is appropriately and wonderfully redistributed for public consumption. So thank you. Andrea had called and asked me if I was interested in speaking at one of these lunches. We used to do them a lot, and so I'm excited that this is like a new rebirth of the Lunch with the League. So I'm looking forward to more lunches. But that said, we were kind of kicking around some different ideas about what I could talk about and some stuff I maybe had done at Treasury. And obviously I'm still a little bit in the aftermath of having come off my own campaign and now running another campaign. It's a statewide campaign, so it's a little bit different, certainly, than a countywide race. And a lot of it, I think, quite honestly, some of what I was thinking about talking about, or that I wanted to talk about, had a lot to do with one of the reasons why I got involved with the League as soon as I moved to Scranton. And that was, I had heard prior to me moving here, I had heard a lot about how difficult politics is in this part of the state. And I heard it over and over again. Oh, you know, you have to be from here. It's a blood sport in northeastern Pennsylvania. I don't know how you're really going to get into it. I have loved politics for the better part of my life. I mean, as a small child, I was always a little rambunctious and opinionated. So I wanted to get involved, but I knew I had to approach it probably from the outskirts of it moving inward. And so I knew that the League of Women Voters is very active politically, but because of its nonpartisan status, was certainly an opportunity for me to get an inside view and to meet a lot of people that were involved in politics without necessarily having to step on any landmines, if you will. And so those of you who kind of understand politics around here probably know exactly what I'm talking about. And so I think it's appropriate that my conversation today is, I really wanted to be very practical. This is not broad strokes. These are not big reflection that I had necessarily on my campaign, but it's very structural in the sense that I think what I found during my recent campaign for county commissioner is that in a lot of really great ways, I was able to generate interest and support from a lot of people who had not necessarily been involved in politics, that had not necessarily worked campaigns, that had they might be active politically, but didn't really get into the nuts and bolts of what it meant to work on a campaign. I don't want to fail to mention this because on the campaign trail I was so exhausted and I was thanking my staff all the time. I'm going to mention Stephanie Pisco, who's sitting in the back of the room. Raise your hand, Steph. Steph was a former student of mine at the university and literally lived with me the entire campaign. She drove me everywhere, she staffed me, she lived the campaign with me. So election night was a little rough, but I had always, since she lived with me, I'm like, thank you to this person. I'd always forget to mention Steph. So Stephanie Pisco is amazing. So, but in that, so I think I don't want to do too much of this before we get into Q&A, because we have some people in the audience that are current candidates. We have people that have been involved in this, and I almost want to start with a few questions in terms of, from you all's perspective, my concern, or what I had heard from a lot of people, is that they weren't sure how to get involved. They thought a lot of these issues or campaigns were either pre-rigged. People already knew who they were going to reach out to in advance of starting a campaign. They don't necessarily know where the entry point is to a campaign if you really want to get involved. And so I'm wondering just a couple of, even if it's from your own experience with having worked on a campaign with volunteers. Oh, see, I've messed you up now. I made you stand to do that. Okay, you'll have to speak into the microphone. But does anyone have, reasons why you might be interested but haven't been involved before? Things that you felt like you weren't sure who to ask or how to approach a candidate or a campaign about getting involved? Joanne Corbett, Southside.
In the primary race for the magisterial district office in South Scranton, East Mountain, and Minooka. My background is I was a school teacher for 33 years. I went back to law school and got my law degree and became interested when I was working with Judge Harhut in family court in running for the magisterial race. And as Liz just said, it's very, our local political scene, it was very difficult to decide to get involved in that because it does have some negative, connotations associated with it. But I will say that my entry into the race began with the campaign school right here. And it's not a free plug here, but honestly, I came to the campaign school and I had not totally decided at that point to get involved in the campaign. I came to the campaign school and I listened to some wonderful speakers. Senator Blake and Judge Moyle spoke about their experience running for office, and I decided at that point that I was going to do it, and I will say it's been a very positive experience. And I'm glad I did it, and very glad to have the League of Women Voters program to have spurred me on.
Wonderful, thank you so much.
Any other students have wanted to get involved and aren't sure how to do it or a little nervous? Any obstacles or tripwires? Very good.
How are you? I guess I don't know if it's a question, but I suppose an obstacle that I faced in the past, and since then I have declared a party, but when I first registered to vote, I registered as no party affiliation, and then I kind of I guess it's me kind of succumbing to the area, because in order to really have a say in who gets to run, you have to register for the primaries and you have to vote in the primaries. So I guess if you might have any advice.
That has become more frequently mentioned in terms of where people feel they have an impact. Lackawanna County in particular is a 2-to-1 Democratic majority. And so given that oftentimes the real election is decided in the primary, particularly for any sort of Democratic, the Democratic nominees the race is the primary. And then the general election is kind of where often, because of the majority, the race is over in the primary. And so for those of you who might register independent, Green Party, any sort of third party, it makes it a little bit different to feel like you have an impact or a voice. And I hadn't considered sort of writing that one down, but I'm going to make a note of that. But I wanted to kind of go over a few things that I saw as myths, so to speak, of what I would imagine, and even myself, when I first moved here and wanted to get involved, what I had perceived to be perhaps what the landscape of Lackawanna County politics looked like, or at least northeastern Pennsylvania, but I think this very well may be suited for lots of areas. But the first, and you have on your tables a cheat sheet, so, but I have the myths written down, but the first is the myth of politics. And I don't know this is completely a myth, but it does reference I think the presumption or the feeling that, the way I kind of outline this is that I think people have myths about a campaign and then how people feel about themselves as a potential volunteer or someone who's interested in getting involved. But the first one is that all candidates are political and already know who will be involved in their campaign. And then about themselves, I need to know political people or to understand politics better in order to get involved. I think when people think of politics, they're not sure, they may not be sure what party they want to register for, they're not sure exactly what the issues are, so they're uncomfortable or nervous about getting involved. Sometimes it's not even issue-based, it's just the political people, and if I don't know the right people or the political ones, then I'm not really going to either be included or accepted into that orbit. I think there is a lot of that in this area, but I don't think that it is definitely not insurmountable, and it's easily penetrated. The second, though, was also strategy, and I had to chuckle about this because I think most people definitely assume about a campaign that all candidates have a plan, and that. And about yourself, that you don't know enough about politics in order to be useful. I have to say, it is probably on the rare occasion that someone has enough time and knowledge of a potential opening of an elected office to be able to plan appropriately for pulling the trigger on an announcement. Because particularly if you're a first-time candidate, you have to set up a committee, you have to get a treasurer, the paperwork that you have to file, it is a lot of work in relatively short order, and you need people not only that know what they're doing, but that you trust. And that said, there's a compressed timeline that candidates are going through. Someone resigns, decides not to run again, gets in trouble for corruption or something. So, there's a whole slew of things that might happen that all of a sudden create an opening for a space in a race, and everybody crams in. And so I think that on the outside looking in, I would imagine that most people, if you're not familiar with how all of that works, that if someone's running, they have a very nicely crafted campaign plan. Certainly a campaign school, if you've been to it, can help you do that, but it doesn't mean that you necessarily know at that moment that you're going to do it. And so it is, I would say, on the rare occasion do candidates come, particularly in local or county races, not only with the plan, but with the kind of time that one typically needs to be able to craft that plan appropriately. And so given that, it doesn't mean that everything's already been decided. So that on the outside, I don't know enough about politics, or I'm not on that inside loop, does not mean by any stretch of the imagination that the campaign is already so well crafted that your opinion, your perspective, your input is not either going to be useful, it will certainly be helpful and often solicited and invited and taken. A lot of times when Steph and I were in the car, or we'd be talking to other people, like other staff members would be around and hashing out different plans, different ideas about how to get to where we want to go, how to do the campaign stuff on a minimal budget. We came up with some really great ideas, but a lot of that was a result of a huge group of people just brainstorming. There was not really a very hierarchical or top-down kind of feeling to the campaign. It was crazy. I don't know if that's always a good thing. There's not some hierarchy, but it was a little nuts. But that said, there's absolutely opportunities for people to get involved, and certainly for young people. I will say, before I move on to the last two, that it is really unfortunate that the big rub about college students is that everybody wants to get them, everyone wants to solicit their vote, and they actually don't turn out to vote in the numbers that makes it worthwhile for candidates to spend the time, the resources, and I hate saying this, but it is where you have a limited amount of time and a limited number of resources. And if there are ways that students can either guarantee, I don't care if it's a group of 10 students that you drag to the polls, it will make it worth it for the candidate to exhaust and spend time soliciting and developing student relationships. It's also just to make sure that you all vote. And when you get out the vote, you also get the attention of the candidates. And it's a double-edged sword. We don't pay attention to you. Candidates don't pay attention to students because they don't vote. They don't vote because candidates don't pay attention to it. So it's a vicious circle, but there's opportunities to break that cycle. And I think my campaign hopefully didn't hurt that I worked here for a while. But I think we made some inroads and activated a lot of students on campus that gave them a good flavor of what it meant to be in the trenches. The last two are actually then going to be follow-ups to my kind of fast and dirty list of my lists. But I think often what people on the outside, people looking to volunteer, might imagine is that candidates on the one hand know how to ask people for their help, and that I'm friends with that person. If she needs my help, she'll certainly ask me for my help. And secondarily, that all candidates know what to ask for from a volunteer or someone who's interested in helping. And so a lot of times we would get, whatever you need me to do, just plug me in, right? Okay. When you have 5 million chicken dinners, like spaghetti situations, VFWs, neighborhood bars, like all these different places where you're going, the offer is tremendously wonderful and fantastic, and that's great, they want to help. And then the time that it takes to figure out how to plug people in, particularly with smaller races, in particular with races that do not have paid staff, where everybody there is volunteering, it's not that they won't plug you in, but what I want to get to for just the next couple of minutes is just to fly through a couple of ways that as you all as volunteers or people interested in getting involved can approach a campaign or a candidate in a way that will automatically pretty much ensure that you are activated right out of the gate, and that you will be of the best assistance, not only to the candidate, but will probably be utilized in a way that will be most interesting for you, and most fruitful and worthwhile both for your own experience and also to help the candidate get elected. I did put on the sheet just the typical full-time campaign positions, only to give you all a sense of how many campaigns are structured, and that these are typically, whether they're paid or not, and in descending order. I mean, some of the ones at the bottom are probably a bit more suited for, say, statewide campaigns or what have you. But at the top, a campaign manager, someone that does your media production, your design, placement of your commercials, your newspaper ads, et cetera, a treasurer and an attorney, and then you have a fundraising finance director, field, political, volunteer, communications, and policy. I say that only because those are typically the most utilized formal positions in any campaign. But I didn't want to be remiss in saying that there may be opportunities for you to volunteer to perform in one of those capacities, but they require much more of a full-time commitment and many more full-time duties than some of the volunteer kinds of positions that I have listed. But I would say that if you're interested in getting involved in a campaign, I think, first of all, you really, nothing beats really wanting the candidate to win. I mean, you have to have some kind of investment in the person's candidacy, or the entire thing is just you're not gonna be interested in it. it will be short-lived for the most part, doing like an internship with a candidate. May be interesting and educational, but nothing beats working for a candidate that you just really want to see win. I've been on that end, and I had a great group of people that were rooting for me when I was running. And so that is what keeps, because campaigns are exhausting and tedious, and the minutia and the repetition and the boredom and the exhaustion, you will never sustain that level of energy or engagement if you don't have some kind of investment in the candidate. And so I just gave you all 3 questions. If you're interested in volunteering, to outline or to know exactly what your skill sets are, who do you know in the community that is in the candidate's voting district? It is amazing. I think a lot of people presume, well, I don't know the inside people. Well, okay, if you're a candidate, you know the inside people. You need to not talk to the inside people anymore. You need to talk to a lot of other people. And so what was tremendously encouraging in my campaign in particular were the number of house parties that I had. These weren't even fundraisers, that people would invite, they had friends from their bike club, because they would bike up in Scott Township and Vandling, areas that I knew I wouldn't be able to get into because it's very rural, you can't do door to door. People who were on boards and wanted to make sure that I knew them, some of their friends, or just their neighbors from their neighborhood. West Side, house party, and everybody just walks over. South Side over on Orchard Street. If you think about what you can bring to the table, this is all about how you prep yourself to make your pitch to the candidate. What your skill sets are, who do you know in the voting district, and then the bonus question, do you know anybody who can write a check? Because all of this, I'm talking about all the volunteer stuff, this stuff does not run without money. And you don't necessarily need a ton of it, but you have to have it. And so you will be the golden child. I don't care if their checks are $25, $50, it doesn't even matter. But if you know 1 or 2 people and you can bring in something, then you're on the campaign, practically. And so what I did then, and I'm not going to go down this, because I want to have certainly some time for questions or what have you, but what I did, I sort of flipped the way, like I'm sure most of you have seen, like sign up to volunteer on a candidate's website. I've done it, everybody does it. But when I was preparing for this, I've actually found that it made it a little more sense to try to compartmentalize or to group this list into being attentive to what volunteers how they're translating some of this. And so I figured, all right, I broke it down by skill set. So if you're good at writing and research, some of them are duplicated under different headings, but so that it's easier, it seems to me, as a volunteer, if you were to see a list like this, am I good with computers or kind of technology, social media? Do I like to do writing and research? Do you like to stay up late in front of your computer and at home? Do you like talking to people and being out and about? Do you like driving? Do you want to be kind of you want to help the candidate but be a little bit under the radar? I had a lot of in my campaign. So, talking to, organizing different kinds of projects, detail, if you like detail and organizing, and certainly some creative opportunities. But I went through these lists because I think, people who do writing and research might not think that they have a lot to offer, but we need people to write letters to the editor, do copy for email blasts, to write out press releases, to send letters to their friends saying, I know this person, I really want you to vote for him or her. If you're tech savvy, all candidates, particularly ones that are not in that universe of technology, need help building a website, building a Twitter page and profile, uploading video clips to their YouTube channel. And also if the campaign has not contracted with or is working with a formal design company or media production company, you could help design a logo or their palm cards, their collateral materials that they hand out. We always say that probably the easiest thing to do if you're just hanging out in front of your computer, help build the Facebook the page likes, for their fan page. You can just fire that off and suggest all your friends to do that. Tweeting and retweeting, campaign blasts. Steph was really great. All the younger people, mostly women on my campaign, were just firing off text messages on election day. It was we didn't formally agree to do that, but it was just what they were doing. And the number of people that were like, oh yeah, okay, for sure, I'll get to the polls, I'll do that. It was tremendous because that's taking advantage of how people communicate in their own space with their own friends and their own contacts. You just run with it. Being a host or a convener, whether it's a fundraising party, house party, identifying key people that you can sit down with. I had a lot of people saying, these are the top 10 people you need to meet in Taylor. I mean, I don't know a lot of people in Taylor, and it was unbelievable how quickly you can get into some of those arenas when you have someone that adopts you and makes sure that you sit in front of the people that they know and they vouch for you and ask for their support. Doing advance for a candidate's event. Walking a candidate around. I had a lot of people, we go to softball games, they were a coach or whatever, we just walk those areas. Someone walked me around their workplace. They didn't have time to organize something, so they said, okay, why don't you come by and I'll just introduce you to all the employees in my office. Well, that's, 50 some odd people usually at one clip, and it's pretty effective. Not wanting to be on the radar, those are some of the, yard signs, literature drops. Drivers, if you like to just drive, every candidate needs a driver. And then all the, talking to the people about the candidate, whether it's phone banking, working the polls, calling into radio shows. I have people, calling into Corbett or what have you. Again, writing letters to the editor. And then the discrete projects, these are actually, I would say, if any campaign were to have someone that could help coordinate these, because they're short-lived and they're discrete with the time limit kind of project. Voter registration drives in advance of the deadline, and the league is always great at helping, put that together, but certainly if you want to sponsor that or do that for the candidate, that's great. Organizing absentee ballots, trying to get the request forms out to the people who need them. Circulating petitions is a big one. You don't need a ton of signatures, but you kind of have to, you're not on the ballot if you don't do if you don't get your petition signatures in. And then getting out the vote on election day. And then, I kind of have the rest of the list. I said I wasn't going to go over all of it, but I did, because there's a lot of, I think there's probably more ways that people can get involved and become active on a campaign than you might have originally thought, and that it doesn't require a formal background in it, that you have far more information and knowledge and contacts than you probably think. And I think that it's important to realize that the candidate is not always thinking, it is such an immediate moment in that space that you're not thinking in a longitudinal sense about the campaign or the election. You're just getting from one event to the next event to the next event. Anybody that comes to the table and says, I know X number of people, I want to do a house party for you with 25 of my friends or coworkers, okay, fine, talk to someone who's doing the scheduling, bam, it's done. You're in, I want to, but if you can come to the table and say, these are the things that I'm good at, I would like to help you write letters to the editor, I would like, if you need some help writing press releases or proofing like content that's on your website, fair enough, and you can just do it. It's amazing how quickly that can happen, but it's, not only not knowing what to ask for, but not being comfortable with how to ask. I mean, I'm a fairly aggressive person, and so, I don't normally have a problem asking for things, but there is nothing more strange than to ask people to support. It's one to say, okay, join the league, come to the book festival this weekend, help us work at the community garden. It's easy to ask people to help for charitable things, nonprofit organizations, good things that you're doing in the universe. It is so odd to ask people to support you. It's kind of like being able to get a look behind, votes for prom queen, like do they actually like me? Are they gonna help? And so being sensitive to that, I think if you don't make the first move, or if the candidate hasn't asked you, there probably is a reason. They might be a little uncomfortable. They're not sure. Maybe you know them from the workplace environment, but that doesn't mean you're going out on a limb supporting them as a candidate. And I'll say conversely, the best thing that I did, and this is a total aside, but is to make sure that you don't take it personally if people can't. Everyone has conflicts. They have organizations that they're involved with, or they have to stay out of it. They have other kinds of friends and people that are involved in people's lives are very complicated, and to make sure that you also understand that if they say that they can't help you, then you give them the stuff that they can help without being on the radar, and then you say, okay, that's fine. So being sensitive and understanding to how candidates, or to how having candidates be sensitive to where volunteers are coming from is also incredibly important. And so this wasn't I apologize, there were no broad strokes here, but hopefully if you all are interested in getting involved or want to communicate with your students, people in your workplace, that if they have wanted to get involved, it's very easy, but I think if you just kind of come and offer a few of these things right from the get-go, it might be a much easier sell, and you'll get invested and included a lot more quickly. So, are there any questions? Oh.
making contact with the campaign office? How do you even find that? Like, how do you know where to contact a candidate?
It depends. Well, I mean, that is difficult sometimes. Not all campaigns have a formal office, and typically they don't set that up until later because it's either expensive. It also, until they're ready to start receiving volunteers. There's nothing worse than setting up an office too soon, and people are like, I'm here to volunteer. It's like, we don't really have anything for you yet, So you want to manage expectations. I think really the best way would be, usually you can find some sort of contact information. It is amazing how fast most candidates are now on Facebook, and so even if they don't have a formal location to go to, many candidates don't, and you're just kind of off on your own on the sidelines trying to figure out how to get plugged in or doing some of the stuff, whether it's from home or helping with scheduled literature drops or door-to-door canvassing, and so they will usually announce it on there, but it is local elections, sometimes it's not until a little bit later that they have a formal physical headquarters. But I would just look for them on Facebook or see if you can, and even the press who covers a lot of these candidates as well, certainly usually would have contact information for them, or contacting the Democratic or Republican parties that are their kind of umbrella organization as well, typically will have that information.
I just want to say one thing.
Wait.
Amber, wait, you should know better.
You should know better.
This is a little off topic, but I want to say something about Liz. From my own experience, I grew up in this area, and I always thought that decisions about candidates were made in smoky back rooms, and nobody had a chance to take on a candidacy. And she lost in the primary, but she opened up a whole new door and way for us to think about politics in this area, and I'm very grateful to you because you showed us that it can be done, and it's wonderful to feel empowered to be able to make a difference. So thank you, Liz.
I appreciate it. Thank you. I have to say that's been my crush on this area. Was really one of the things that led me to run for office, and mostly it's because I think people either give the area a bad rap or people have become accustomed to believing that about themselves, and that has just never been my experience. I have never felt excluded. Quite the contrary, have felt overwhelmingly included in this community. Hadn't tried it out in the political universe at that point, but the thing is, if it's the people that had included me, they vote. That's not the entirety of what this area is like, and so, I mean, for me, having lost by a pretty small margin was disappointing, but it was unbelievably encouraging to know that not just that people were okay voting for me, but really for a candidate like I was, not being from here originally, being a woman, not having most of the signifiers, but it proved everything that I thought was true about what my experience of the area was, and it's nice to be like, see, I told you. So it's good.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. And I think that a good takeaway from me is, we've heard a lot of times from people, but I told the candidate that I was available, that I would volunteer. So hearing from a candidate's perspective, you're overwhelmed, you're overloaded, and it's on us. The onus is on us, the volunteers, to actually come forward and say, but here's what I can do. Here's how I can help you. And I think that's a great lesson and a great takeaway from today. So thank you, Liz. We really appreciate that. So once again, please join the League of Women Voters. We are a nonpartisan political organization, grassroots, membership-based. We meet here at the University of Scranton campus, usually on the third Wednesday of the month, but not this week because we're doing this today. And we met last week. But do watch for us on ECTV. Check out our website at lwvlackawanna.org. This program will be on the website, as well as interviews with our candidates that are coming up, and 2 debates, Scranton City Council and Lackawanna County Commissioner. And again, please don't forget about January, Ready to Run, in partnership with the University of Scranton and with the Political Science Department here. We'll be presenting campaign school for women. So thank you so much for your attention. I hope you took something away from today. Thank you.